He looked normal, quiet. The kind of person you might pass by without a second glance, blending seamlessly into the background of everyday life. A face you wouldn't notice in a crowd, just another individual among the throngs of people, each with their own stories and secrets. But behind the appearance of a regular man hid a monster, a predator lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Dennis Nilsen, called the Kindly Killer, terrified London for 5 years. His reign of terror left an indelible mark on the city, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within. He targeted the weak young men looking for friends and comfort, vulnerable souls who were often overlooked by society, making them easy prey for someone with sinister intentions. Nilsen offered them a hot meal, a listening ear, and a bed. Instead, he killed them. His methods were calculated, his demeanor disarmingly kind, masking the horror that awaited his victims. More than 15 lives were taken, their stories silenced by a killer hiding in plain sight. Each victim had a life, dreams, and loved ones who were left to grapple with their sudden, inexplicable loss. He was a scary reminder that evil often looks normal, the face of a neighbor, a colleague, or a friend, hiding malevolent intentions beneath a veneer of normalcy. How did he avoid being caught for so long? The question haunted investigators and the public alike as they struggled to understand how such evil could go unnoticed. How could a man do such terrible things without anyone suspecting? His ability to blend in, to appear harmless, was his greatest weapon. The answers are complicated, involving things society didn't notice, mistakes by investigators, and the scary, effective methods of a clever killer. Nilsen exploited societal blind spots and investigative oversights to continue his spree. Nilsen understood his victims' weaknesses and used them cruelly. He was adept at identifying those who were lonely, desperate for connection, and he manipulated these vulnerabilities with chilling precision. He was a master trickster, able to calm and reassure even as he planned their deaths. His charm and apparent kindness were tools he wielded with deadly efficiency. His crimes shocked the UK, showing the dark side of a society struggling with homophobia and prejudice. The era's social issues created an environment where his victims' disappearances were not immediately noticed, allowing his horrific acts to continue unchecked. Born in 1945 in Fraserburgh, Scotland, Dennis Nilsen's early life was full of sadness and loneliness. The small fishing town, with its cold gray skies and harsh winds, mirrored the bleakness of his childhood. His family life was far from ideal, and young Dennis often found himself feeling isolated and misunderstood. His father, a Norwegian soldier, wasn't around much. The man was a distant figure, more like a ghost in the household than a parent. This absence left a void in Dennis's life, a void that would never be filled. Young Nilsen found comfort in the beautiful Scottish coast, developing a love for nature. The crashing waves and the endless horizon provided a temporary escape from his troubled home life. He would spend hours wandering along the shore, lost in his thoughts, finding solace in the natural beauty around him. But then his grandfather, who he loved and relied on, died. This was a devastating blow for young Dennis. His grandfather had been his anchor, the one person who made him feel safe and loved. Losing him was like losing a part of himself. This loss hurt the young boy deeply. He became more withdrawn, retreating into a world of his own. The pain of his grandfather's death was a wound that never healed, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. He became more withdrawn and quiet. His mother and siblings noticed the change, but they were unable to reach him. Dennis was slipping away, lost in his own dark thoughts and feelings. Some people believe this is when Nilsen's dark thoughts began. The seeds of his future actions were planted in these early years, nurtured by his loneliness and grief. He started to develop a fascination with death, a morbid curiosity that would only grow stronger with time. Seeing his grandfather's body, a fisherman, was the first time Nilsen saw a dead body. This experience had a profound impact on him. Instead of feeling fear or revulsion, he felt a strange sense of peace. It was as if he had found something he had been searching for. He later said he felt strangely interested, peaceful instead of disgusted. This reaction was the first sign of the darkness that was growing inside him. It was a darkness that would eventually consume him, leading him down a path of unimaginable horror. This morbid curiosity, along with his growing loneliness, hinted at the darkness growing inside him. He began to fantasize about death and control, finding a twisted sense of comfort in these thoughts. The line between reality and fantasy started to blur, setting the stage for the monster he would become. As Nilsen got older, he joined the army, looking for rules and a purpose. The military provided structure and discipline, something he desperately needed. He excelled in this environment, finding a sense of belonging that had always eluded him. He did well in the strict environment, becoming a respected cook. But the darkness remained. Despite his outward success, the inner turmoil continued to grow. His fantasies became more vivid, more disturbing, and he struggled to keep them at bay. His fantasies grew stronger, focused on control and owning people, often with a morbid interest in dead bodies. These thoughts consumed him, driving him to the brink of madness. The monster inside him was no longer content to stay hidden. It was ready to emerge, to take control, and to unleash a reign of terror that would shock the world. London in the late 1970s had a lively but often temporary gay scene. Young men, many running away from prejudice and looking for acceptance, came to the city. They wanted friends, a community, a safe place. Nilsen saw their weakness and used it in a chilling way. He became a hunter, stalking the pubs and clubs where his victims went. He was a master trickster, offering warmth, food, and friendship to lonely people. Many of his victims were runaways or homeless, living on the edges of society. They wanted stability, someone to listen to them, to offer a kind word or a warm meal. Nilsen gave them all of this, making them feel safe. He would invite them to his apartment, a seemingly harmless offer that hid his evil plans. Once inside, the trap was set. He would give his victims alcohol, talk to them, all the while tightening his control. Then he would kill them. Behind the normal-looking front of 23 Cranley Gardens was a house of horrors. Nilsen's apartment became a stage for his darkest fantasies. The air inside smelled of death, a terrible reminder of the awful things done there. Nilsen's methods were chillingly effective. He usually strangled his victims, a slow and silent way to end a life. Sometimes he would drown them in the bathtub, watching without emotion as they died. But the killing was only the first part. Nilsen's true evil showed in the terrible rituals that followed. He would wash and dress the bodies, posing them in different ways, talking to the dead. He would keep the bodies for days, sometimes weeks, putting them on chairs, putting them in bed as if they were still alive. Nilsen lost touch with reality. He looked for friendship in death, a twisted version of the human connection he desperately wanted but could never have. For 5 years, Nilsen got away with his terrible crimes. He lived a double life, one that was meticulously hidden from the world. By day, he was a seemingly ordinary civil servant, but by night, he transformed into a cold-blooded killer. His ability to compartmentalize his life was chilling, allowing him to continue his gruesome activities without arousing suspicion. They stayed hidden inside his apartments. The walls of his home bore silent witness to the horrors that unfolded within. Each room held dark secrets, with the remains of his victims concealed in the most unthinkable places. The clutter and disarray of his living spaces mirrored the chaos of his mind. He moved from Melrose Avenue to Cranley Gardens, taking his gruesome secret with him. The change in location did nothing to curb his deadly impulses. Instead, it provided him with new opportunities to continue his killing spree. Each move was a calculated effort to evade detection, but it also meant starting over, finding new victims, and creating new hiding places. When young men disappeared, especially in the gay community, it often went unreported, or if it was reported, the police didn't investigate seriously. The societal prejudices of the time played into Nilsen's hands, allowing him to exploit the vulnerabilities of his victims. The lack of serious investigation into these disappearances meant that Nilsen could continue his killing spree with little fear of being caught. Society's prejudices and blind spots let Nilsen keep killing. The indifference of the authorities and the stigma surrounding the victims' lifestyles created a perfect storm for Nilsen to operate in. He knew that his victims would not be missed by many, and this gave him a sense of invincibility. The bustling city around him was oblivious to the horrors that were taking place in its midst. He blended in, looking like everyone else, his true self hidden by his normal appearance. Nilsen's ability to appear ordinary was his greatest weapon. He was the unassuming neighbor, the friendly colleague, the man you would never suspect. This facade allowed him to lure his victims with ease, gaining their trust before revealing his true, monstrous nature. But even the most careful killers make mistakes. Nilsen's meticulous nature could not prevent the inevitable slip-ups. Each crime left behind traces, small clues that would eventually lead to his downfall. The weight of his actions began to take a toll, and the cracks in his carefully constructed facade started to show. Nilsen's downfall came from an unexpected place: his plumbing. The very infrastructure of his home, which he had relied on to dispose of his victims, turned against him. The pipes that had carried away the evidence of his crimes became the key to uncovering his dark secret. The remains of his victims, carelessly flushed down the drains, clogged the pipes at 23 Cranley Gardens. The gruesome discovery was made by a plumber, who was called in to investigate the persistent blockages. What he found was beyond anything he could have imagined. Other tenants complained about the bad smell and blocked drains, which led to a plumber coming. The foul odor and the constant plumbing issues had become unbearable for the residents. Their complaints set off a chain of events that would ultimately lead to Nilsen's capture. The discovery of what looked like human flesh shocked everyone in the building and would soon reveal the horrible truth about the quiet man who lived in apartment number 1. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community as the true extent of Nilsen's crimes came to light. The quiet, unassuming man who had lived among them was unmasked as one of the most notorious serial killers in history.